Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
In one of our Great Man Masterminds, we've recently embarked upon a 90-day exploration on how to become better lovers. And one of our realms of exploration, and this shouldn't come as any surprise to you, is the realm of sexuality. Learning about what turns us on, exploring what turns our partners on, learning about how to keep the fire burning over extended periods of time, how to express our desires that maybe we feel uncomfortable talking about, how do we handle rejection, and in general, how do we have better conversations about all this stuff? Well, in service to that theme of how to have better conversations around sexuality, I knew that I needed to introduce you guys to a very special woman who has a particular knack for distilling the practical steps necessary to invite your partner to have better conversations around sex. And that woman is Hannah Deindorfer. Now, Hannah's a difficult woman to describe succinctly because she's like a Swiss Army knife of talent, but I'm going to do this as best justice as I possibly can. For business, she teaches female fitness entrepreneurs how to build 6- and 7-figure business practices. She also teaches female business owners how to deepen their connection to pleasure, playfulness, purpose, and power through the realm of sexuality. And she's also a queen of resilience. She's a sexual abuse survivor. She's overcome anorexia, battled addictions and depression, and now thrives in her personal life and also as an entrepreneur. She's also a proud submissive in the BDSM realms. And she's going to drop some wisdom bombs on us about how you can take the BDSM communication techniques and use them to electrify some of the more traditional sexual settings and conversations that you may be having. So, in this episode, Hannah's going to give us a step-by-step blueprint for how to have better sexual conversations. She also teaches you how to invite and create an invitation for your partner to have a conversation around sex that feels like a gift for her to receive. She'll equip us with 3 or 4 questions. These are super simple, practical questions that you can ask your partner to allow her to feel safe and cared for. She'll talk about how to handle those feelings of rejection when, you raise a desire or make a request that is rejected or denied. She talks about the importance of how and why to praise your woman when she says no before or during sex, and why establishing safe words elevates trust and enables the exploration of new territory. And she'll also talk about the most underrated part of sex, in her opinion, which is the aftercare. And she'll give you examples of how you can bring your woman in for a smooth landing after rocking her world. And one more quick note. The title of this episode has the word woman in it, and you've heard me refer to that multiple times in this introduction because Hannah is speaking from her own sexual experience as a woman. But I reckon that most of what she shares here is applicable to any sexual partnership that desires better communication. Enjoy this episode on a step-by-step blueprint to better sexual conversations with your woman, featuring Hannah Deindorfer. Hannah, the queen. I got to tell you how grateful I am, not just for you, but for our mutual friend, Alexa Martinez, otherwise known as that sex chick, who knew that you and I would become really fast friends. She sends me a text message a month or 2 ago. She goes, I've got this woman who you got to meet. She's coming to New York City, spending some time there. And you and I hung out, 3 times in 7 days. I don't like people. I mean, I love people. I don't like people that much. But I love the time that we spent together. We always had these deep, funny, expansive conversations, and just knew I had to bring you on the show to meet our listeners at the Great Man Within podcast. So Hannah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I think the reason why you wanted to hang out with me so much and why you like me so much is because I'm not a person, dude. I'm an alien space kitty.
This is truth. This is truth. You are not a human being. You've got stories to prove it. And we want to get into that, but I figured let's warm you up with a little game that I've enjoyed playing here with a few of our guests recently. It's a little thing we call this or that. Okay?
Yay.
So all you got to do is pick this thing or that thing, whichever way your heart desires. So the first question, this one actually does have a correct answer. Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes.
You nailed that. The yoga studio or the squat rack?
Oh, squat rack.
I knew you were going to say that. Mushrooms or ayahuasca?
I've never done ayahuasca, so mushrooms it is for me.
Mushrooms guy here too. Are you a 5 love languages or an erotic blueprint type of gal?
Erotic blueprint, baby.
Do you know what your erotic blueprint is?
Sensual and kinky.
Sensual and kinky.
Mm-hmm.
I forget which one. I think sensual is one of my top. But if we were going to go down the path of 5 love languages, are you a physical touch or words of affirmation?
Words of affirmation all day.
What is it about the words that hit you?
So when someone is constructing a story for me or an expression for me, I have this really beautiful visual that I like to imagine that with their words, they're building this little gift and they're wrapping it up with a ribbon and they're, very carefully creating it based on everything they know about me. And they're drawing on all of their resources and energy that's available and personal history to build a little gift that's just for me. And all that they want is for me to just receive it and love it and be with it. And when that gift is about me, for me, it's just bliss on bliss on bliss on bliss. And it feels good.
Damn. When you put it that way, who needs to be touched ever again? just send me those personal gifts all day long.
You made me pick between my top 2 though. So physical, I just love that physical reassurance. Hey, you're good. I'm here. I got you. That feels good.
And for our listeners, she's touching her shoulder. So is that your spot that allows your nervous system to feel relaxed?
If it's someone that I trust already and that I love and we're connected already, hand on the heart or on my back in my heart space is the most reassuring.
Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention, fellas. Well, all right. Last 2 questions before we get into your story. I already know the answer to this question. Dom or sub?
Oh, you can tell by my little kitty ears that I'm a little baby sub here.
That's right. And we're going to get into that and why you get so much pleasure out of that. And this last one is an impossible question. This is an impossible question to answer. Would you rather have a lover who's great at kissing and terrible at oral sex, or a lover who's tremendous at oral sex, can't kiss if their life depended on it?
Oral sex wins every time, for sure. if he's top oral sex, we don't ever have to kiss. It's fine. You can just kiss me on the cheek.
Okay. So the question is not nearly as impossible. I thought you were going to grapple with that one a little bit harder.
No.
You're very clear on what's important. Okay. So Hannah, thank you for coming on the show because your work is with the women of this world, and you tend to work with women who run their own businesses, who are in service to others. Mm-hmm. So you coming here to talk to the men about, the insights that you've seen in getting into the inner worlds of women, but also the path that you've walked yourself on your own healing journey around sex and sexuality, I think is going to be really, really valuable to the men who are listening. So maybe if you'd like to just dive into the parts of your story that really provide some context for the conversation we're about to have today, that would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in our co-creation of what this podcast was going to be, one of the main topics that we will be discussing today was sex. So for the sharing of my own personal history, I'm just going to talk about my sexual history primarily. There's a lot more to me than that, but sex is essential. Sex is part of who we are. And so my sexual history is tied into every other piece of who I am. So when I was 13, I lost my virginity to my first quote unquote real boyfriend. He really, really wanted to. He was older than I was, and I didn't want to. And so my first sexual experience was non-consensual. And the 3-year relationship that contained that first sexual experience was filled with more non-consensual experiences, emotional abuse, a lot of control. He was very, very insecure. And so he was projecting a lot of those insecurities onto me through control, manipulation. And I was confused and young and thought that that was what love was. Got daddy issues in spades over here. My dad's bipolar. And so all of that happening during my adolescence, 13 to 16, these very formative sexual years, created a really deep lack of trust for men and a lack of trust in myself because I was continuing to stay in this experience. So when that relationship ended, I had this relationship to sex that was, it's only for another person, particularly the man. It's not for me. It's not for my pleasure. It's just something that has to be done so that I don't get punished or abused. And so someone would like me. So someone would like me more. And so from about age 17 to 23, I developed a really deep eating disorder and also was using my body and using sex for validation, manipulation, emotional connection, control. I was really just very disconnected from my physical experience and very unsafe in my sex. And I thought that my body was only good for getting people to like me. And that was it. And sex was a huge component of that. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago when I was 26, I'm 28 now, I'll be 29 in a couple months. A couple years ago, I was in the most healthy relationship that I had ever been in, which is great. Our sex was pretty lackluster. It was just like at first, like in any relationship, it's like passionate and exciting because it's the new person. I was still dissociating. I still wasn't present. I still wasn't saying what I wanted. I still had all these like sexual games that I would play where I still in my head was like, well, let's just like hurry up and get it done. It's not really for me. And I couldn't speak what I wanted until I found Tantra and BDSM. And my first foray into that realm of non-vanilla sex just blew the lid off of my sexual expression. I finally, for the first time in a Dom sub container, in a BDSM container, felt safe in sex. I felt connected to my body. I felt connected to the other human being that was inside of me. And it was so powerful. It changed everything in my life, not just my sex. It changed my vitality. It amplified my gifts. It allowed me to express myself more freely and easily in all these other areas of my life. My business blew up. It was just like this massive outrippling effect of when I feel safe in the most vulnerable space I could possibly be in, if I'm safe there, I can do anything. I can say my truth anywhere. I can speak up for myself and set my boundaries and own my power. And like, oh, it just like brought me so much life. So now I am currently supporting women in that process too, that like coming home to their body, that reincorporating all of the pieces of themselves that they abandoned and really loving themselves and being able to express themselves sexually for the first time in their life. So that's my story.
Hannah, that was amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I feel really connected to you after sharing that story. Thank you for being so generous with the details of your history and sharing some of those vulnerable moments around your early experiences, non-consensuality, moving through places of meaningless sex, feeling that your body was the only thing that was what allowed other people to like you, and then ultimately arriving at what some may characterize as an unlikely frontier where you found yourself and reclaimed your sexuality, which was in this realm of BDSM. And I think it'll be really cool for our listeners who, if you think about like kind of the spectrum of, say, sexual power dynamics, say a more traditional man, because that's who we're speaking to here, may look at the Dom sub relationship as being kind of the extremes. Mm-hmm. But at the same point in time, it's on a spectrum of if you're a man who's leading in your relationship and then maybe your partner, you're inviting your partner to follow, or your partner wants to follow, it's on that same spectrum, maybe just not out as, quote, extreme on these edges of polarity. But it's so helpful to learn from those edges, right? Because what you have started to inform us is, in order for that Dom sub relationship to work, for you to feel safe in that sub position, you have to trust the leadership of that Dom implicitly. And so maybe if you can give kind of an introduction to those of us who have never explored the BDSM realm, and what was it about those first experiences that allowed you to say, oh, now I feel like I'm safe in this environment?
Yeah, there are two components that I want to bring to awareness. The first is communication, the ability to talk about what you desire, what you want, what you're open to, what you don't want, and then co-create a scene, which in BDSM is like the container for sex. It has a clear start and end date, and we call it a scene. Within that context of communication, all of the things that are already implicit in your sex, where you are going to be leading a woman through an experience, all of those implicit agenda items are made explicit. And that communication allows for an opening and relaxing of like, oh, I know what's going to happen here and I can trust what's going to happen here. And that created a really safe environment. The other thing was energetic. So there's communication and then the energetics of it. And having a Dom who felt confident in himself and confident in his ability to trust himself, who was experienced and knew how to create a safe environment for me, that energy that he was holding really allowed me to slip into my own submissive role and hold the polarizing energy of that, which felt very safe.
Yeah, let's dig into those. So when you say take the implicit and make it explicit, what are some examples of that to make it real?
So an example in BDSM, usually before a scene, there's what's called a pre-scene consultation. And it sounds very like clinical and boring, but it's basically dirty talk, but like
sanctioned dirty talk.
It's like sanctioned dirty talk. It's like super fun. And within that negotiation, basically what's brought to light is boundaries and creations of safe words. So before you go into a sexual experience with a woman in BDSM, there's an opportunity to pause. So you're like getting hot and heavy, you're making out, you like both are, you can tell the energy's flowing and you're desiring a sexual experience and an interaction. In that moment, the pause before moving into a sexual space allows for an opening of conversation and an opening of safety where a new communication can occur. So within that pre-scene consultation, some of the things that can be brought to light are, like I said, boundaries. So what are the things that you absolutely don't want to experience inside of this container? Some of my personal boundaries are, I don't want to be hit so hard that it makes my skin bleed or open. I am not interested in any type of piss or scat play. My boundaries may change based on the day. Maybe if I'm on my period and I have cramps, I'm like, look, today I'm not really interested in very aggressive sex. I would like something that's more soft and gentle and sensual. It allows for me to say I have an injury. This part of my body is aching or hurting. And so just be gentle with that, please. Those are some of the things that can come to light.
The one that you just talked about, how your boundaries change depending on the day or maybe where you are in your cycle, that one is so huge, because if we get into this assumption, like we feel like we know our partners, what they like and what they dislike, but we don't take into account maybe our partner is having a stressful day, or they're in a certain part of their cycle where they're feeling more tender, or maybe they're feeling more aggressive and expressive. To not have that awareness, to not actually communicate on that when you're in the quote scene or in a sexual situation, could lead to like
just disconnection.
Yeah,
miscommunication. Yeah. Like the whole intention of a pre-scene consultation is to sync up, right? You're looking for an opportunity to really collaborate and connect and co-create something that's going to be an amazing experience. And there's some kind of like narrative that runs sometimes about like, well, if I stop it, then the sexual energy is going to stop flowing. Or if I pause the scene, then like what happens if like she's not going to want it anymore or something like that? Or like the communication's unsexy and we should just know what to do, quote unquote. But that opening of communication for a woman, from my perspective, allows so much relaxation and trust being built. And it's also super sexy. Like being able to say, yeah, today I want to be spanked really hard. Today I want you to pull my hair a little bit harder. Today I want you to tell me I'm such a good girl and tell me how I can serve you. Like there's so much tension that can be built inside of that. It's really fun and exciting. And so it generates more delayed gratification, which again builds more desire, builds more tension, builds more anticipation of the actual sexual experience and gets everyone on the same page. So it's not an interruption or a barrier to sex. It's an essential component to creating more connection.
Yeah, I love this. As you're describing it further, it's moving further and further away from like a clinical type of thing where, like you could easily picture this as, sitting down with a clipboard and like a checklist of questions and making it very, and whatever it is, just kind of anesthetic. I don't know what's the right word I'm looking for, but like sitting. So if you had a partner, a male partner that was not engaged in BDSM, but wanted to have a similar kind of conversation to you, how would you want him to bring that conversation to you before your scene?
What I would desire is for him to say, hey, I am so into you right now. I would really love to engage sexually with you. Would you be open to having a conversation about how that might look?
Mm-hmm.
That like feels good to me. A lot of people are very visual, right? So if we use the word specifically, how that might look, there's an opportunity for us to start imagining and using our amazing visual creation tool to build the scene, to build our fantasy with each other.
That's awesome. All right. So that invitation gets you to say yes. So when you sit down to have that conversation, what would you be looking for from your man in terms of his leadership in that conversation, the space that he sets there?
The first thing I think that helps is if he shares some of his own boundaries first. So rather than just immediately saying, okay, so we've gone from like, are you open to discussing how that might look into, okay, I'm going to lead and I'm going to share some of my own personal boundaries so you can get an idea of what a boundary might look like. So he shares his own boundaries. He shares, I'm not interested in having my ass played with, or I am interested in having my ass played with, but I don't want any fingers inserted, or whatever that looks like for his own boundaries, or I'm not interested in biting or scratching. I wouldn't like to have any marks on my body, or he shares whatever his boundaries are, right? Doing that puts him in a position of vulnerability in some ways and invites a woman into being able to share her own vulnerabilities. Also, she can see on display what a boundary looks like and that he can hold that for himself. And it creates an opportunity to trust that, okay, if he can hold a boundary for himself, I can probably trust that he's going to be able to hold my boundaries too.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
How important is it for you to feel that, for you to open up fully during a sexual experience?
Absolutely essential. We'll talk about safe words next, but just having the feel that I can trust that he'll keep my desires and boundaries in his head while we're going through this and maintain those really creates safety for me to just drop into my body and relax. Because probably in the first interaction, that's what I'm going to be scanning for. I'm like, I volunteered information about what I want and what I don't want. Were you paying attention? Are you following along with the things that I've shared? Are you taking note? And it's not to say that he has to be perfect in that. So like men who are listening, I don't want you to think that like as a woman's sharing all these things that she wants and all the boundaries that she has and what she's afraid of, or you don't have to be perfect in it. But if your intention is there and your intention is to uphold that, she's going to feel that. She's going to feel that you really are eager and wanting to support her and like honoring herself in that.
This is great stuff. So you've gotten through the invitation. Here's how you would bring it up. And you've talked about the man going first with his boundaries and then inviting her to express her boundaries. What else is part of this conversation?
So some of the things I think are important to bring to light are where a woman is in her cycle. Like, what are your energy levels like? How is your body feeling today? Do you have any tension? Do you notice anything? Like, what sensations are present for you? Or just allowing her to like check into her physical experience and start to get into her body and notice what's there. Again, with each of these, he can lead if he'd like he can share his own experience first, because that'll continue the kind of leader follower already falling into that kind of dynamic. And then so like body sensations, what's present. You want to check in on emotional state as well. So how are you feeling emotionally right now? Just like a general sense of what emotions are present. And then desires. So that's the very fun part.
You say that for last?
Yeah. You save it. I think save it. Well, actually, the only other thing that I would like to insert into this is like, if it's the first time this consultation's happening with a new partner, also at some point in the boundary discussion, inserting safe words. So just communicating to her, like after she's shared her boundaries, just letting her know, okay, great. Something that I want to include in our play today is safe words. So I'll be checking in with you, seeing how you're feeling, being in tune with your body. And also I'm going to verbally check in with you about how you're doing and you can let me know. And I want to give you the power to at any point, let me know through the use of these safe words that you want to slow down. You want to use a little less impact. Maybe the pressure is too much for you, or the speed is too much for you, or you want to stop altogether. So if any of those first things are present, you'd like me to slow down or just relax a little bit more, yellow is perfect. Just yellow like a warning, right? So it's a stoplight system. So yellow, if you say yellow, I'll know that I'm going to like just slow down a little bit. I'm going to reduce some of the impact. Like maybe I'm spanking you and you say yellow. I'm going to like slow down or reduce the level of intensity there. And then I also empower you to use the word red. And if you use the word red, I want you to know that I will stop the entire scene. We'll pause. We'll check in with you. We'll drink some water. We'll have some breaths together. And we'll figure out what went wrong. If I've crossed a boundary, we get to communicate about that and we get to figure out what happens next together. Whether we want to move back into that, we can do that. If we want to just call it for the night, if you're totally done, we can do that too. And I encourage you and I support you in using these words. And I really would love for you to do that.
Yeah. You are making a lot of friends on the show right now because the blueprint that you are outlining, Hannah, is so practical and also elegant. There's an elegance to how this is outlined because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you just walk through what you would want and you're a very well-practiced woman. You're a woman who knows what she wants and you've articulated and you just outlined what would feel good for you. But also, you have a chance to look into the sexual lives of many other women. And this is also kind of a summary of what they've expressed to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you follow this, if you do this, the sex, honestly, it doesn't even matter because you've literally just blew her mind by creating this safe space for her that she's going to be like, where did you come from? Like, what is this thing that you're doing here? This is so epic. I've never experienced this before. Like, this is exceptional level of integrity in sex.
Great. So then let's talk about ways in which a man may inadvertently contaminate that space. So what are the ways that you've okay, I saw you kind of jump here. So you've got some stories. Go for it.
I really don't think that men ever intend to create unsafety for women. I hold the divine masculine as this beautiful, safe, loving container. And also you're an animal. So by proxy of that, there's some things that just happen for you energetically that you don't realize probably are happening, or some subconscious things that are at play that you just don't know that are happening because they're physiological and they're just coming up for you and you don't really know what to do with them. And that's okay.
Hannah, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that because I think there's a lot of men who have felt shamed for feeling that, who right now it's, because a lot of that energy has made women feel unsafe in the past and has led to harm in the past. There are consequences for very well-intended men to feel guilty or shameful about that part of them. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you just said, hey, we have these, like we are part animal. We have these energies, these desires that can be overwhelming, overpowering. We don't know what to do with them. And it's okay to feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
That's some real medicine. So I just wanted to
totally
acknowledge you for that gift. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And I acknowledge every single man that's listening to this. If you're listening to this, you are already so far ahead of general male population because you're here with the intention to learn and you really are open-hearted and wanting to grow and wanting to create safe spaces for women. So I acknowledge every person that's listening to this. Thank you so much for your intention to create this safety for the women in your life. You are rewiring and rewriting some very deep, painful narratives that like we're doing this work together, like hand in hand. So thank you. So as far as like some of those subconscious things or physiological responses or ego responses that come in that can contaminate the environment, one of the main one is feeling rejected or feeling disappointed by a boundary that's created by a woman. If a woman shares with you, I'm on my period, I don't want to have sex, or I'm actually not into anal and I would prefer not to do that. Like any type of no, any type of boundary. If your initial response to that is disappointment or feeling rejected or even some like anger that might come up in that, you can feel that. It's okay to feel that. And I honor that in you because like there's just like a human part of you that just wants to be loved and accepted for all of your desires. And if you express that and project that onto the situation with the woman, she automatically will feel unsafe. She will feel like, oh, okay, my boundaries actually aren't acceptable just based on your disappointment. Right now, I know that if I say a thing that I actually want or don't want, it might hurt you. It might hurt your ego. And we have so much programming to please installed inside of us. Most women will override their own boundaries in order to please men. And it's just this dance that's going to create more harm than good.
So what she may end up doing, and there's a variety of ways that could react to that, is she ends up saying yes when she didn't want to, kind of like when you talked about your first non-consensual sexual experience. That could become so uncomfortable for her that maybe the next time she just avoids sex altogether, so as not to have to engage in that conversation or to manage your emotions when you get disappointed.
Ghosting happens all the time now.
Because of that?
Because of that, yeah. Because she doesn't know how to say no, so she just will ignore to avoid you. Bye.
Yeah. So this is so important. It's the words that you used before we started recording is praising the no. So can you explain, maybe even from your own experience, when you've had a lover that's just like been really good at praising your no and what that feels like?
Oh
what
my
that
gosh.
sounds like too.
So like, oh, absolutely. So the first real BDSM scene that I had just a very incredible, attentive lover in that scene. And we talked about safe words beforehand. And he told me that yellow means slow down, or limit means, you know, that's where I've hit my limit of impact and I don't want to keep moving beyond that. As the scene went on, he was spanking me and using a flogger and like increasing in intensity and increasing in intensity. I checked in with myself and I was like, actually, that's limit. And I said it out loud. I said limit. And then the moment that I said that, he stopped everything and he held me. And he was like, I am so proud of you. It is so hot when you say what your boundaries are. Oh my God, that just turned me on so much because now I can trust you more and I can go deeper with you. And I feel so good when you say what you want. You are such a good girl. Like that was so affirming and gave me so much empowered feeling. And it was hot. Like the way that he phrased it was also sexy and enjoyable. It didn't break from the scene at all. It just contributed to a deeper feeling of safety. And I was able to even more drop into my body and be like, okay, I'm good to say where my limits are. Now I want to say them more. I want to speak those out more. And it was awesome. That's
a beautiful example. I got moved hearing you describe that. Let's take it to the other side where, let's say there's a man who has a genuine desire that would want to be fulfilled, sexually speaking. And maybe, you know, a lot of the guys in our community are married or in long-term relationships and have desires, you know, have committed to one partner. So it's either this partner or it's nothing. It's nowhere else. And the desire is a no. You know, let's say maybe like he wants to receive oral sex. She doesn't want to give a blowjob. And maybe that's a no for not just this time. It's a no for months at a time. And like, what do you do with that where, like you were saying before, it's okay to feel the disappointment. You don't want to bring it into that container. But at the same time, if you have as a one side of that equation have needs and desires that are consistently not being met, how does that get dealt with?
This actually comes up quite often with dynamics where the man wants to be submissive in the dynamic. Like this happens all the time where there's a man who's very dominant in his normal life. He's the head of the household. He's a great leader. He shows up for other men in his life. He shows up for his woman all day long, all the time. And in the sexual space, he's like, I just want to fucking relax. I want to surrender. I want you to lead me through an experience. I want you to seduce me. I want you to just curate this amazing time for me and worship my cock. And like, just, I want you to create this for me. And I don't have to think about it or do a thing. I want to submit to you. And I've seen oftentimes when a man doesn't know really quite how to communicate why he wants that, it's harder for a woman to get into the giving of that pleasure. So in the example of the man who desires a blowjob and the woman doesn't want to give oral, unless there's some medical reason for not doing that, there's probably some internal block around shame or a block around a past experience that wasn't good for her or some type of narrative that she's already running, or also like, are you dirty? Like take a shower. Like, first of all, like clean your cock, please.
Clean your dick, trim the hedges.
Yeah.
I got it.
Curate a beautiful environment, curate a beautiful campus, right? So whatever that reason may be, opening a dialogue for her to be understood in why she might not want to do that, first of all, will help significantly without judgment, without pressure. And then also, if you can check in with what's at the core of that desire. Like, why do you want to receive oral pleasure? Like, is it because it just feels really good to you? Is it because when you are receiving oral pleasure, you feel like you're being worshipped and you're a king? Is it because it helps you feel appreciated and loved? Is it because you have a deeper fantasy of like many women giving you oral pleasure? And like in that moment, like you can just like picture that in your mind. You can close your eyes and go into that experience. Whatever it is that's driving that desire at its core, if you're able to voice that to a woman and really explain, like, it would help me feel so loved. I would feel so appreciated. I would feel so desired by you, and really deeply like allow her to feel your emotional experience and attachment to that. She's going to be way more receptive to doing it, because in the just like, I want a blowjob, you're not giving it to me conversation, there's just not not understanding that's happening there. And it's just like, yeah, it's very surface level, and it's very just, there's no opportunity for real deep collaboration in that. So communicating about what is the deeper driver of that desire. And if it really is a no, like if it really is like, she just like can't do it, impossible for her to do it, how can we fulfill the core of that desire in a different way? So like, if it at the core of like receiving oral sex is, I want to feel appreciated and worshiped, how can we get that desire fulfilled some other way? Maybe it's through an erotic massage. Maybe it's through some kind of act of service. Maybe it's through a foot massage. Maybe it's through like bathing him, right? Like there's so many other ways to get that specific core desire fulfilled that you can find another way that's not necessarily just the thing. Like the thing is never really the thing usually.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And man, I'm so surprised that more of those, I want a blowjob, you're not giving it to me, conversations don't work out.
I know, it's shocking, really. People love feeling wrong, dude. It's just like the best feeling ever.
So Hannah, as we bring this conversation in for a landing, I think it's really cool for us to explore the two parts that I think a lot of us ignore as men about the sexual experience, which is the part that happens before the sex and the part that happens after the sex, right? We're totally consumed with what's going on during sex. You gave us a beautiful blueprint on how to initiate the pre-sex conversation. Mm-hmm. Sex is over now. What about the aftercare?
Yeah. I think aftercare is one of the most highly underrated parts of a sexual experience, because after you've had sex with someone, oxytocin is fucking lit, man. All of your endorphins are high. All of your physiology is buzzing with joy. If it was a fun experience, you're just like in this bliss state, in this happiness state. And if it didn't go the way that you intended it to go, aftercare is also a place where you can come together and communicate about why didn't that quite feel the way that we wanted it to feel? Or how could we continue to improve on this place? So there are a few components to making aftercare really, really effective. One is the physical component to it. And the other component to it is the conversation and the communication piece. So as I teach all of my clients all the time, animal comes first. We got to take care of the animal first, and then we can go into the cerebral neocortex, because that's how our physiology is built, right? So we as humans evolved from lizard brain to mammalian brain to prefrontal neocortex. That's how our brains are constructed. So when we're in sex, we're deeply in this animalistic, like deep limbic system in our nervous system. And we have to take care of that animal first and help it to feel safe before we get to the ability to communicate and access to that, which was the last developed part of our brain in our evolution. So as we're coming out of sex, for a woman, if there was a lot of intensity in the sex or there was a lot of impact in the sex, her nervous system is probably pretty jacked up from that.
Yeah.
And so we really want to address that and like bring her back down into like a really calm, safe space. And for a man too, like if you just came, you're like, your heart's beating, you just like ejaculated, you completed the thing that you're here to do. You just like did it. You checked the box, you did the task, and there's like so much adrenaline, right? Like it's it. You won the game. Like that's the whole thing. And so in that state, there's opportunity for each of you to co-regulate with each other through your physical experience. So something really easy ways to tap into regulating your nervous system is first and foremost through breath. So if you've noticed like she's breathing really heavily or you're breathing really heavily, you can just make really gentle eye contact and like pull her close and just be like, hey, let's just breathe together for a couple minutes. And you can just say like, just follow my breath. And you can just like, and just like do some like really nice slow breaths together, just like connecting, making eye contact, breathing, being with each other, holding each other, and like having that physical contact with the breath really downregulates nervous system. If things got messy, showers are like some of the best aftercare that exists. You can be in a watery space, touching each other, washing each other off. It can be very erotic, or it could be like just very soft and loving. And so once that's completed and there's like a physical component that's taken care of, like some cuddling or showering together, just checking in with her about, hey, would you like some more cuddling? How are you feeling now? What's your emotional state like? Just like doing another little check-in with her to see what she's wanting or desiring more of allows for like, if you need to do more physical stuff, you can keep doing that. Or then you can move into having some communication. And that communication can just look like, hey, how was that? What did you enjoy about that? What was your favorite part? What's something that I could do that would turn you on even more? You can just really focus on the positive part of it, and it'll allow for a deepening of that experience too. Or like, what's something that happened that was like unexpected that you liked, that you didn't really know that you were going to like? Like, that's a really fun question too.
That's a good one. One of the things that I learned later in my sexual, what do I call it, a career? Like out of my sexual, what do I call my sexual experience? Like the sexual journey I've been on with partners was, and this was something that I actually put words to, and I wrote this down. I posted it on Instagram. It's like one of the most popular, most engaged posts from women specifically was when a woman orgasms, when she orgasms now, I learned to slow down that moment and I just hold her. Mm-hmm. Right. In the past, like when she would orgasm, I'd get really excited. I would be, I'd feel validated, and then I just throw her into the next position, and, we just kind of keep going. There's like no interruption. And what I learned was like, sometimes she needs the leadership of, hey, let's just take a breath, right? Feel that fully. I'm going to hold her. Maybe I'm still inside of her. And we breathe together, like you were talking about, syncing up the breath. And then I can feel like her body kind of go through something, I don't know exactly what it was, but then I have a chance to look her in the eye and be like, what was that like? What are you feeling now? And then she usually, once she's had a chance to process through that, then she ends up taking us into a direction that like now she's ready for. And it's created these beautiful experiences that in the past, I just kind of bulldozed through. And so I think what you've done in this conversation today, I think that's really important is when we get turned on, when I say we, I mean, talking about guys, like that, those blinders can come on and it's just like the sexual act itself becomes the only thing that we can see. And what you're doing with this conversation is like, you're actually pulling back the lens and we're looking at the holistic experience of like, what is that communication container on the front end that establishes a safe space, but also leadership, boundaries, exploration of desires, working out the underlying whys, getting into that sexual experience. But then once it's over, what's the aftercare? And I think that aftercare part, like for me, going into the sexual experience, knowing that that is a part of that process that is always going to happen. And to leave gas in the tank for that. Because I also know what it's like to be depleted and just want to flop over and pass out. To leave something in the tank or to build my stamina so that like when I orgasm and a new kind of energy or a calm passes over me, I can still meet her with the eyes, with the breath, with the shower, whatever else that, allow her to feel like cared for after that sexual act.
Mm-hmm. And think about yourself too. Like it's okay for you also to check in with yourself and like after your own ejaculation, what do you want to feel? Like, do you want to feel more connected? Do you want to feel more relaxed? Do you want to feel more taken care of by her? Can you request something from her in the space? Like you've just given her a beautiful gift. If she's orgasmed and she's had an incredible time, like she's like, yeah, I totally want to like wash your body. Yeah, I would love to hold you. Like there's like this reciprocation that can exist there too, where you don't always have to be the one that's giving. And I think that's also super important if you're in a dom space to know that dom burnout and like top drop is sometimes what it's called is real. It's a real thing to feel like you've just given everything to this person. You've like led them through this beautiful experience and then you feel unappreciated afterwards, or like you feel like you've like, why is this not reciprocated? All that it requires is for you to ask. So like, don't be afraid to speak what you need. Don't be afraid to ask for like just like some like head scratches. I love head scratches, back scratches, a little bit of just like gentle massage, whatever feels good for you too. You also have a right to your needs in this space. Just as much as you would want to take care of her and you want her to come back for another experience where she knows she'll be supported and loved, like you will not have energetic fuel to go into another experience with a woman over and over and over if your tank is empty every time. So think about that too. What'll fill your cup?
All right, Hannah, you've got a bunch of new fans now after listening to this episode. This show is geared towards men, but we also have a lot of women who listen as well because they love being a fly on the wall. And I'm sure there's some women who want to learn from you. And I know that you offer courses and you put out a lot of really, I love how rich and substantive your Instagram stories are. They're colorful, they're energy, like they're not lazy, they're detailed, they're rich and meaty. Like I come away from your Instagram stories with new sexual knowledge, wisdom, laughter, unexpected things that I didn't know I needed to know. So where are our listeners who are like now enamored by you the way that I am? Where do you want to point them?
Yeah, like you said, my Instagram is where I hang out most of the time. So on Instagram, I'm at Hannah Deindorfer. I'm not even going to attempt to spell that. Just like look at my name. It's just my whole name.
It's going in the show notes.
It's going in the show notes. I'm sure you'll be able to find me. And I do run a program called The Sacred Slut that is specifically for women to feel empowered in their sexuality. Like if you are a woman and you want to feel like I do, you want to go through this journey with me, and or you're a man who has a woman in your life who you think could benefit from this, I'm so available to have conversations about this. And my DMs are open all the time too. So join my free stuff. It's fun.
Oh, and Hannah has a lot of free stuff. You also offer a weekly Friday afternoon call to everyone in your community, right? So it's 12 o'clock Central Standard Time for about an hour and a half. Is that right?
Yep.
I have to read our audience the copy on your Sacred Slut program. The Sacred Slut is a 10-week online group program for the service-centered online coach who is craving a deeper connection to her pleasure, playfulness, pussy, purpose, and ultimately her power. And if reading that made you blush, squeal, or squirm a little, you're in the right place, baby.
I wrote that. Yeah.
You wrote that shit. How's it feel to have a man read that?
Oh, it feels so good. Make my pussy tingle.
Ooh. Well, that's how we're going to go out on this episode. Hannah, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your compassion, for the practicality and the elegance. We love you and hope you come back and join us again soon.
Love you. Thank you.
Here is your trusty, reliable call to action at the end of every episode, where I ask you to hone in on one key takeaway, one insight, one aha that you are going to put into practice into your romantic life. And Hannah dropped a whole bunch of wisdom bombs on us, questions that we can ask, invitations that we can make to have better conversations around sex. What is the one thing that you're going to commit to take this and put it into practice? And as always, linked in the show notes are the contact information for Hannah and all of our guests, and a link there to also join the Facebook group if you want to connect with other men and have deeper conversations about this episode.